Welcome to the Catholic Midlife Podcast, where we address the challenges and the opportunities of midlife from a uniquely Catholic perspective. This is the time, my friends, for a deeper renewal of your Christian vocation. Come and enter into the freedom of Christ that allows you to be the person you were created to be, because there's an amazing, awesome, exciting next season of life waiting for you. Hello, and welcome to the Catholic Midlife Podcast. I'm Karen Herbert, and I'm here with my co-host, Curtis.
Hi, everybody.
It's great to be here with you. And Curtis, you want to share a listener comment with us?
Sure. So we asked in our Facebook group, the Catholic Midlife Podcast.
Ooh, that's so creative.
What's your advice to parents who have an adult child moving back into their home? And a group member said, patience. Don't assume anything. Communicate. Be kind, as she or he probably doesn't really want to be back home with mom and dad.
That's a great perspective, and there's a lot of truth in that.
Absolutely. I'm excited about this episode. We have a really great, fun, insightful suggestion for you to follow for this week, so don't miss that. We are going to set this up, however, talking about E prime.
E prime, yes. And if you Google E prime, you're going to get a lot of interesting things show up for you. We are talking about a specific kind of E prime. And Curtis, I did have a couple of my friends mention to me that they listened to our previous episode on language and positivity. And I think the words they used were interesting and fascinating. And really, there's so many fascinating things to learn about language and how it shows up for us and what it does. So this episode on E prime, we're talking about a very specific kind of language. E prime is basically a form of English where you're excluding every form of the word to be. I mean, like, be, been, were, is, was, will be, am, are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
The infamous is. You can't even say is.
I know.
Is that possible?
I don't know. I don't know if I could do it. And just so everybody knows, we're not going to attempt to have this podcast and never use a form of the verb to be. I don't think we could do it at this point.
We are not going to do that. We are going to explain some things about E prime, however, and then make one specific suggestion that we think is very powerful.
So the verb to be really is, as I'm sure is not stunning to you all, the most used verb in the English language, and it shows up in almost every sentence, written or spoken, almost every sentence.
It is almost always present.
So why would it be helpful to exclude forms of the verb to be?
Well, there are a lot of reasons advanced for using E prime, some of which, frankly, are very exaggerated. However, some are very practical. Here's an anecdote, however. This fellow teacher at the University of Florida, a linguist, Alfred doggone it.
It's Korzybski?
Thank you.
Good job.
Did practice. Anyway. He counseled his students to do this, to eliminate the to be words for a whole semester. And so he had half his students eliminate it and the other half not.
Okay.
Typical psychologist, right?
Sure.
He's got some experiment he wants to run on you.
This may not be a formalized study.
So he reported that the students that eliminated all forms of to be improved their letter grade by their scores by one whole letter grade.
Really?
Yeah,
That's
it was very powerful.
That's very interesting. Well, something I found out from the proponents of E prime is that some people find it helpful when particularly they're struggling with a problem to step back and take out the verb to be and articulate what they know in some other way. So one proponent of it is this guy, Robert Anton Wilson, who seems like a bit of a character.
Yeah, kind of a kook, but interesting guy.
Interesting. So I probably wouldn't follow him philosophically or psychologically, but he made this comment, which is, when I'm really stuck with this problem, say in science or in daily life, if I can just write down what I know about the thing in really strict E prime, I always get some kind of insight about the problem and about what I know. And his example is, instead of trying to say that a photon is a wave or a particle, let's just try to describe what we know about it. It's really more accurate to say the photon acts like a particle when measured by certain instruments, and it acts like a wave when it's measured by other instruments. And you're just putting out there what you know and getting back into describing what it is you're seeing.
So it's a precise way of speaking.
Yes, exactly.
Instead of saying what it is or is not, you're describing what you observe.
Yes.
And here where we're starting to get to the real pay dirt around this concept. And advocates of E prime believe, and I think this is really true, especially about the English language, that this use of the word to be, it creates false absolutes in our minds. When we say something is blah, 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 we often don't really mean that's exactly what it is. We don't mean that the thing is an identity with what we say it is. We have a loose way of talking, but our brains are hearing an identity. So that is a bad dog. You're hearing, oh man, bad dog,
Right. And whatever that means to you. So it kind of sets up this black and white absolute in terms of identity.
Yeah, and you're speaking all that stuff into your unconscious. And as you create these false identities, you start to create these untrue internal representations and beliefs about who you are and who the people around you are and about what's going on around you.
So really, there is a lot of clarity to be gained, it seems like, if you have an understanding of E prime. And that makes sense because when we're talking about reality, we're only really communicating certain aspects of that reality to ourselves or to other people. And I think the statistics are you have 2 million bits of information coming your way each second to your senses, and you only consciously take in 126 bits of information. So there's a lot in our environment that we're not even perceiving, much less saying or communicating.
It's so true. The other day, I was playing this big, long, complicated game that I like to play, Twilight Imperium. It's a game that requires a lot of focus. And I realized after I'd been playing it for like an hour and a half, I looked up and all these people had come into the play area. They were doing things. The place was filling up. And I was just completely oblivious to it because my focus was stuck on about 2 square yards of information.
Right. You were consciously investing in certain things that you considered important at that time. So you just deleted all this other information.
Absolutely.
Exactly. I'm thinking even in our language, if you say something like, well, it is generally understood, ... in context, you're communicating some kind of meaning that your listener may pick up. At the same time, it's pretty unclear. I mean, who understands? And what specifically are they understanding? What's their context? What else are you not saying about something being understood? What's not understood? Or if there's a continuum, to what extent is their understanding along the continuum? Who would disagree with this? How would they understand it? Like there's all this other stuff to be said that's not involved in your communication.
We recognize this when we hear the passive voice. We realize, oh, there's a lack of agency here. Mm-hmm. E prime goes beyond that and picks up on yet more of the vagueness and indeterminacy of our language and using it for writing, and has some other practical uses. It can be a tool for those things as well. Yes.
Well, how about let's use as an example something you referred to earlier, the is of identity, creating an X equals Y. Something is. For example, I could say, Curtis is a lawyer. That's the is of identity, and it applies this absolute truth. Something is or it isn't. However, I mean, in truth, you fulfill many roles. I could say a lot about Curtis's skills, interests, activities, personal characteristics, relationships to other people. Like Curtis is a son, father, husband, believer in Christ, Minnesotan, but always a Texan at heart, a life coach, a podcaster.
Thanks, honey. I'm just so multi-dimensional.
I didn't even say kite surfer yet. Game player.
Okay, maybe I'm not that multi-dimensional.
I could go on. And that's not even getting into, say, your personality style or your conflict style or your management style. There's just a lot that can be said about you, and it's not equated to your role or any one characteristic.
So that is an example of creating an identity, meaning a one-to-one match.
Yeah.
Curtis is a lawyer.
So if I was using E prime, I might say more accurately, Curtis practiced law as a patent attorney for about 20 years. And in many contexts, this is going to be just a small part of what anybody might know about you.
Exactly, Karen. So you may have known somebody for a long time.
Yeah.
And you have ideas about them. You have a working model of who they are in your brain. And all of a sudden you find out something, what? You used to do that?
Oh,
something
yeah.
that doesn't fit in with this set of internal representations you've made. And you say, wow, I never knew you used to do that.
Yeah. It's somehow, I think it changes then our perception. We have to redo our representation of that person and having that element in who they are. Like for example, when we were dating, I don't even know if I've ever told you this, but I told one of my mom's friends that you were a patent attorney, and she formed this certain picture in her mind. She happened to know some patent attorneys, and then she met you, and her comment was, "Oh, I just breathed a sigh of relief. I thought, oh, he's not really like the other patent attorneys I know." It made me laugh.
Yeah, it could be an interesting group.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I recognize, Curtis, that it's probably not reasonable for me to stop using the word is, but I think I could start to notice when I'm using the is of identity, and I could step back just a little bit and broaden my perspective. And I think one of the points that the E prime people make is when you try to rephrase what you're saying, you actually have to step back and choose what you really want to say about the person or the situation or yourself. You have to think, well, what really am I trying to communicate here, which is often a lot more complex and has more layers than just this is.
The is of identity, that's, well, I was going to say lazy. It is a habit, though. It's imprecise, and it's surprising when you speak with more clarity that, one great thing about eliminating the is of identity is it gets you out of the judgment zone.
Right. That's a great point.
He is lazy.
Yes.
Or you're being obnoxious.
Right. Versus when I asked you to help me by doing this thing, you never did it.
Precisely. So,
which is really what my problem is.
Yeah, and those words of identity, yeah, that can easily lapse into judgment, which isn't helpful.
It's not. It's not. And it's choosing to not only judge, but to pick this one sliver of reality and just focus on that and not the whole picture.
Yeah, and I think we know from our experience how powerful being on the receiving end of that judgment is. And it speaks to the power of the is of identity. And it's a great motivation to be more precise.
It is. And here's something I've really come to appreciate about language is it's not just that I want to communicate this thing and I'm using my language to communicate it to you. But language actually works the other way around. When I say something out loud about myself or another person, this is determining what part of the reality I'm going to focus on. And that determines how I respond and what I act on. So what I say really matters because it influences how I'm going to perceive reality and how I'm going to respond to you. It's really important.
So it's not just my unconscious mind listening. It's always listening.
It is.
But it's also my whole self directing my attention.
Yes.
That's a great point.
Yeah. There's a lot of truth in that saying. Your language really does create your reality.
Absolutely. How about this one?
Yeah.
I'm a good parent. I'm a bad parent.
Ooh, ouch. Ouch. That reminds me of, what did you say to me the other day? You said, oh, I'm so grumpy with these cats.
Well, they wake me up at the 5 a.m. That is unacceptable.
Yeah, I think you even used the word curmudgeon at some point. But, what's the whole picture? What's the full reality? Well, you feed the cats, you give them medicine, you take them to the vet, you clean the litter box, you pet them, you talk in your little sing-song voice to the cat. I mean, you do a lot of things for the cats rather than just grumping at them in the middle of the night.
It's true. So by analogy, I'm a good parent, I'm a bad parent. The truth is you do a lot of things.
Yeah.
And you have strengths, you have weaknesses and things you might wish for a redo, but you've always been doing the best you can. And it's not so simple as I'm good or I'm bad. There's almost a lack of humility in characterizing the whole situation that way. But in any ways, it's almost meaningless to put such a broad label on something that's got so many layers to it.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. It loses any kind of real helpfulness in anything to make that kind of a broad statement.
Yeah, what does it even mean?
Yeah.
And that's why for the next week,
ding, ding, ding,
our challenge is, go ahead and tell them, Karen.
Okay. When you are going through your day and you hear yourself say, this is, or that is, or she is, or I am, stop, pause, step back, and see if you can articulate what you're experiencing in E prime, not using any form of the word to be. How about that?
The is of identity is out.
Is out. I think I need a partner in crime, Curtis. I think I need you to help me do this. We can have some interesting conversations.
Absolutely. And this is a great challenge for the week. And we'd love to hear how it goes.
Exactly.
So you can always email us at thecatholicmidlife@gmail.com with any of your comments, thoughts, witticisms, high fives, questions,
jokes. How about some jokes?
Or to get in touch with us.
Yeah. We'd love to hear from all of you.
So thanks a lot for being here with you, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for being here with us. The Catholic Midlife Podcast is for anyone that wants to receive the abundance of life that God has for each one of us. Take a moment right now to tell a friend about us.